For as long as games have been around, so have challenge runs. Additional self-imposed challenges to make a game more interesting, such as not dying, not getting hit, or maybe not leveling. One of the oldest and most legendary challenges is the infamous 3-day challenge for Majora's Mask. The premise is simple: beat the game in 3 days before the moon falls. Majora's Mask is a game based around time. In fact, you start the game in a giant clock tower and have a clock in your UI, right there in the middle. This clock is a constant reminder to show you how much time you have left before the world ends, which again is coming in 3 days. Now, if you've played Majora's Mask before, you'd know that this seemingly impossible task is made possible by the use of the Song of Time, which resets the 3-day cycle and allows you to start again. Obviously, gamers being gamers, we set off to find a way to beat the game without using the song, and thus the challenge was born. Now, of course, with the use of glitches, you can make this entire challenge a breeze, go around missling all the way to the moon. But we're going to be doing this without any tricks or glitches. Is it possible to beat the game as intended without using the song? Well, let's find out. First, before we get to details, we'll need to discuss one little thing, one little asterisk, a tiny exception to the rule. Even though it's called the 3-day challenge, it's more so a 6-day challenge. You see, there are 3 days of shortened time where you're forced to play a prologue as a Deku. You can't legitimately escape Clocktown, so we're going to overlook these first 3 days. Now, how are we even going to do this challenge anyway? Well, beating this is kind of like a puzzle. We have to find the right order of events to beat the game, or else we simply won't have enough time. So, how does one beat the game, you might ask? Simple. Use these 4 masks and the Oath to Order to get to the moon to fight and defeat Majora in an epic concluding battle. Which will be tough because we'll be rocking some pretty basic equipment being on a time crunch. So let's work backwards from here. Trust me, working backwards from the end will save us a ton of time. See what I did there? Save time? Okay. So the battle with Majora occurs at the end. To get the Twin Mold Remains, we need to beat the Stone Temple Tower. But in order to get to the tower, we'll need a few things, like the Elegy of Emptiness, which requires the Mirror Shield, which requires the Song of Storms. And here is one of our major items and talking points. In this challenge, it isn't only that we have 3 days to beat the game, it's that certain items are only obtainable at certain times in the game. This isn't a straight linear ordeal. For example, Song of Storms is located in a grave on night 1. So while the events we have listed up to this point can take place on all of day 3, this song must be acquired sometime on night 1. So stick a pin on this, we'll be back for it later. Now, back to where we were. In order to even get to Ikana, we require the ice arrows to freeze these Octoroks and a hook shot to get up there. So, ice arrows and Gyorg remains are in the 3rd temple, Great Bay. Makes sense to get together, but getting into the Great Bay is a pain because we're going to need a song taught to us by the Zora hatchlings, which we acquire through the use of bottles. And here we have a bit of a dilemma. We don't have a lot of time to run around and grab all these bottles, but the more bottles we have, the faster it is to collect these eggs, which there are 7. 3 in Pinnacle Rock and 4 in Pirate Fortress. And since nobody in their right mind would ever go to Pinnacle Rock more than once, we need 3 bottles to collect all of the eggs there in one go. The first bottle is mandatory and will be obtained all the way in the morning of day 1 as we rescue the hag. The second will be won through some dangerous Goron racing, which comes stocked with gold dust, and that's a whole nother issue we'll tackle in a moment. And the third will be obtained by racing the beavers. Twice. So let's put pins in those for now. So assuming we figure out how to get these bottles, while gathering eggs, we will obtain the hook shot and learn this song to get into the temple. But hold on, I hear you saying, what about that gold dust? How do we use that second bottle? Well, you're right. We need to get rid of it. And there's only a couple feasible ways to get rid of it. Either we can sell it at night, or we could, as of day 2, leave it with these guys as they temper our sword to its final form, which could be useful, and that's what we'll do. So yeah, in addition to going fast, we also won't have a sword for most of the run, as it takes 2 full days and 100 rupees to get the sword from Kokiri to Razor to Gilded. So all this stuff in Great Bay will take up day 2, and it seems like a lot to do, until you realize, oh crap, we only have 1 day left to do 2 temples. But that's not even the worst part, because the crux of this challenge, the defining question, is how are we going to get over these fences? To even get to Ikana or Great Bay in the first place, we're going to need our horse Epona to leap over these, and she is the key. Without her, none of this is possible, and now the true routing begins, because in order to get Epona, you must obtain her during day 1, specifically before 6 p.m. on the first day. Anytime after that, no go. And if done correctly, correctly, you will have literal in-game minutes to spare, which equates to real-life seconds. Now, we've already used up all of day 3 for Ikana and all of day 2 for Great Bay, which means we just have to do everything else in day 1. To obtain our trusty steed, there's a giant boulder blocking our way, which requires the Goron Keg. Only way to get this and use it is to become a Goron and do the Goron Keg challenge, which is blocked behind this giant sheet of ice. Now, we are on a tight schedule. We have to get past this ice as soon as possible. This either melts due to beating Snowhead or by using fire arrows. But we can't beat the temple right now. In fact, there just isn't enough time. But there is enough time to get the fire arrows. So we'll need to enter the temple, snatch the arrows, and immediately leave, doing as little as possible. So how do we get into the temple? Well, we need a song we learned from a screaming baby, which requires the lens of truth. But to even get into the north, to even do any of this, we need to shoot this icicle down, which requires the bow, which of course is located in Woodfall. See a pattern? Again, much like Snowhead, we have no time to actually beat the temple. We just need to rush through, save a hag, take a boat cruise, sneak through the palace, infiltrate the temple, grab the arrows, and get the flip out because time is so precious. And be sure to put pins gathering the remains of the bosses of Woodfall and Snowhead. We'll be back for them. Now, before this run even really begins, we need to gather supplies by getting money from the bank. The bank, you say? But how? Well, in the prologue, we have to wait for 3 days. And in those 3 days, we're gonna grind money. This will give us the head start we need, as we'll need equipment. So buy bombs, sticks, and Deku Nuts, which will all be vital to the journey. And here we are at the start, with a route mostly planned to Epona and day 2 and 3. So if we can manage to visit 2 temples, grab 2 temple items, do a keg challenge, and win back our horse before 6 p.m. on day 1, we're good. And this is by far the hardest part. But night 1 is equally packed. So take a breath. Here we go again. The moment we regain our steed, we need to head directly to the graveyard to grab the captain's mask from this big jerk and use it to enter this grave to get the Song of Storms. You can unpin that now. Next, we'll need to travel to Snowhead. That's right, not Woodfall. We're going to Snowhead first to beat that temple. We'll gather the remains, then drop our sword off before the morning for tempering. And while that's being done, we need to go Goron racing and win our gold dust. This you pretty much have to nail in your first try. Even a single failed attempt can jeopardize the timing of the entire run. That in hand, we'll head back to Woodfall and beat that as fast as possible, which is complicated by the fact that we don't have a sword at the moment. Unpin the Eldawa remains, and once done, as soon as day 2 starts, we'll collect our sword to immediately drop it off again with the gold dust to free up that second bottle. You can unpin that one. With that, we continue the run as planned. Beat the first 2 temples in day 1, Great Bay in day 2, and Stone Temple on day 3, before finally going to Majora with what little health and weaponry we have. And there you have it. Majora's Mask in 3 days is completely possible and very much doable. But was it intended? Now that's an excellent question. Part of me thinks not. A large part of the game revolves around resetting time over and over with the ocarina, and perhaps the most convincing evidence is that in the 3DS version, they actually made the inverted Song of Time worse than the N64 version. So in our run, the inverted Song of Time must be played as soon as the run starts. This song slows time down to around 33% of its original flow, but in the 3DS version, it slowed down to around 50%. It's a pretty cool change, but this also makes this run, to my knowledge, impossible in the 3DS. Now, before we wrap up, you might have noticed that the footage I use for this contains things like double magic, double defense, the Mask of Truth, even the couple's mask. Well, that's because gamers being gamers, I tried to one-up the normal 3-day challenge by also adding on additional parameters, such as all fairy rewards, all Skulltulas in both houses, and even the Anju and Cafe quest. If you thought this video was nuts, be sure to check out that run, which I failed multiple times, in the description below. Until then, stay timely, my Majora's Mask minions.